Close your eyes for a moment, or keep them open. It does not matter. What matters is this. Right now, beneath the soil of modern India, there are ruins, ancient ruins, ruins so advanced, so carefully planned, so eerily modern in their design, that when archaeologists first uncovered them in the 1920s, they refused to believe what they were looking at. They thought it was a mistake. They thought maybe the dating was wrong. Maybe they had misread the stratigraphy. Maybe the carbon was contaminated, but the numbers kept coming back the same, and the structures kept looking the same. Grid-planned streets, standardized bricks, underground drainage systems, public baths, multi-story buildings, a writing system no one has yet fully deciphered. All of it. 4,000 years old. This was not medieval India. This was not ancient Rome or Greece. This was something that flourished at the exact same time as the Egyptian Old Kingdom, when the pyramids were being built, and yet almost no one knows about it. Why? Because history, as most of the world has been taught it, begins in the West, or in Egypt, or in Mesopotamia. India gets mentioned briefly, maybe a paragraph about the Indus Valley, maybe a sentence about Ashoka, maybe a photo of the Taj Mahal, and then history moves on. But tonight, we are not moving on. Tonight, we are staying right here, in this land, in this ancient, extraordinary land, because what ancient Indians built, what they engineered, what they created, what they thought, what they dreamed, spans thousands of years and deserves far more than a paragraph. So settle in, get comfortable, let your breathing slow down, let your body relax. And let me take you back, way, way back, to a time before anyone wrote the history books, to a time when India was the most advanced place on earth. Part 1, the Indus Valley Civilization. Let us begin at the very beginning, or at least as far back as the archaeology will take us. The year is approximately 3,300 BCE. That is more than 5,000 years ago, in the fertile plains of what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, along the banks of the Indus River and its tributaries, something remarkable is beginning to take shape. Not a village, not a tribal settlement, a city, and not just any city, a planned city, a city built on a grid, streets running parallel and perpendicular to each other, like the streets of a modern American town, except that this was 5,000 years ago, long before Rome, long before Athens, long before any European civilization had even scratched the surface of what urban planning means. This is Mohenjo-daro, and it is one of the most astonishing places ever discovered on this earth. When archaeologists first excavated Mohenjo-daro in the 1920s, they found something they were not expecting. The city had no palace, no pyramid, no monument to a king or a god, no throne room, no royal cemetery stuffed with gold and treasure, no giant statue of a ruler demanding worship. What they found instead was infrastructure, civic infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that most modern cities struggle to maintain properly. Every home in Mohenjo-daro, every single home, was connected to a sophisticated drainage system. Wastewater from toilets and bathing areas flowed through covered brick drains that ran beneath the streets and emptied into larger municipal sewers outside the city. These drains were built with inspection holes so workers could access and clean them. They were engineered with a slight gradient so that waste flowed downhill naturally without pumping. This is not primitive engineering. This is deliberate, calculated, civic planning. Compare that to London in the year 1850 CE. In 1850, London, one of the largest and most powerful cities in the world, dumped its raw sewage directly into the Thames River. People drank from the Thames. People died from cholera because of it. The great stink of 1858 was so overwhelming that Parliament had to stop its sessions, and it was not until the 1860s that London finally built a proper underground sewer system. Mohenjo-daro had one in 2500 BCE. Let that land. But the drainage was not the only remarkable thing. The city also featured a structure that archaeologists call the Great Bath. And it is exactly what it sounds like: a large, watertight, carefully constructed public pool, measuring roughly 12 meters long and 7 meters wide, sealed with a layer of natural tar to prevent leakage. Steps descended into the water from both ends. Surrounding galleries and changing rooms lined the perimeter. The water was fed by a large well and drained through a covered outlet. No one knows exactly what the Great Bath was used for. Some scholars believe it served ritual or religious purification purposes. Others think it was simply a public bathing facility. But everyone agrees on one thing: it was built with extraordinary precision. The bricks are uniform. The mortar is tight. The waterproofing is intentional. This was not accidental architecture. And speaking of bricks, the bricks of the Indus Valley Civilization are one of the most fascinating details that researchers keep coming back to. Across the entire civilization, which at its height may have covered an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, the bricks are standardized. They follow a specific ratio. The length is twice the width. The width is twice the height. Every brick from every city, from every excavation site, follows this same ratio. This means that across hundreds of miles, across different cities, different builders, different decades, and perhaps centuries of construction, someone was maintaining a standard, a building code, a shared measurement system that ensured all bricks from all locations were interchangeable. That kind of standardization requires communication. It requires governance. It requires a bureaucratic or cultural system sophisticated enough to maintain consistency across an enormous geographic area. The Indus Valley Civilization, at its peak, around 2500 BCE, included over 1,000 known settlement sites. Among them, two major cities, Mohenjo-daro in the south and Harappa in the north, both grid-planned, both with advanced drainage, both following the same brick ratio. both producing the same small square seals, stamped with the same undeciphered script. That script, the Indus script, is one of the great unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. Over 4,000 examples of it exist on seals, pottery, and small tablets. Researchers have tried for nearly a century to crack it. Some think it is a full writing system. Others argue it is a proto-writing system used for record keeping. But no one has definitively translated it, because unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, there is no Rosetta Stone for the Indus script. There is no bilingual inscription that gives researchers a key, and so the thoughts, the records, the stories, the names of the people who built these extraordinary cities remain locked behind symbols that stare back at us in silence. Who were these people? We do not know their names. We do not know what they called themselves. We do not know their religion with certainty, though figurines found at the sites suggest goddess worship and ritual importance of water. We do not know who their leaders were, or how leadership worked, or whether leadership was even the right word for their system of governance. What we know is what they built, and what they built was extraordinary. And then, around 1900 BCE, it began to fade. The cities were gradually abandoned. People moved east. The civilization dispersed. And the reasons remain debated to this day. Climate change, drought, shifting river courses, migration, or perhaps some combination of all of these. But the civilization did not collapse violently. It drifted away, slowly, quietly, like smoke, and for thousands of years, the cities lay buried beneath the earth, forgotten, unknown, waiting. Part 2. The Vedic Age and the birth of ideas. The Indus Valley Civilization faded, but India did not go quiet, not even close. As the great cities of the Indus were gradually abandoned, a new cultural force was taking root in the subcontinent. The people who had come to be called the Vedic civilization were composing, memorizing, and transmitting one of the most extraordinary collections of knowledge ever assembled by human minds. The Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Samaveda, the Atharva Veda. These texts, composed in Sanskrit, are among the oldest religious and philosophical texts in continuous use anywhere on earth. The oldest portions of the Rig Veda are believed to date to somewhere between 1500 and 1200 BCE, and they were not written down. Not at first. They were memorized, transmitted orally from teacher to student, generation after generation, with extraordinary precision. Scholars of Vedic tradition developed elaborate memorization techniques, including reciting the texts forwards and backwards, and in complex permutations, specifically to catch any errors that might creep in over time. This was an oral tradition that was more carefully preserved than many written traditions. But the Vedas are not just religious hymns. They contain within them the seeds of mathematics, astronomy, linguistics, philosophy, and medicine that would flower over the following centuries into something the world had never seen before. Let us talk about mathematics, because here ancient India did something that changed the entire trajectory of human civilization. Something so fundamental that it is easy to forget it was ever invented at all. The number zero. Zero is not nothing. Zero is one of the most powerful conceptual tools ever created by a human mind. Zero allows for positional notation in number systems. Without zero, you cannot write the number 10. You cannot write 100. You cannot distinguish between 1 and 10 and 100 without zero as a placeholder. Every modern computer, every digital system, every piece of technology you interact with today operates on binary code, which is fundamentally built on positional notation, which requires zero. And zero, as a mathematical concept with its own symbol and operational rules, was developed in India. A mathematician and astronomer named Brahmagupta, writing in 628 CE, provided the first written rules for arithmetic operations involving zero, including multiplication by zero and the behavior of zero in equations. But the concept had been developing in Indian mathematical thought for centuries before him. The numeral system we use today, the one taught in every school in the world, the one with digits 0 through 9, and positional notation, is called the Hindu-Arabic numeral system. The Hindu part of that name is there for a reason. These numerals were invented in India. They spread to the Arab world, and from there to medieval Europe, where they replaced the Roman numeral system. And they changed everything. Try multiplying MCMXCIV by XLF18. That is 1994 times 47 in Roman numerals. Now try it in the numeral system India gave the world. 1994 times 47. Much easier. The system is so superior that the transition, though it took centuries, was inevitable. And mathematics was only one field. Astronomy. Ancient Indian astronomers made observations and calculations that were centuries ahead of their counterparts elsewhere. Aryabhata, a mathematician and astronomer writing in 499 CE, calculated the value of pi to 4 decimal places. He proposed that the Earth rotates on its own axis. He gave a remarkably accurate estimate of the size of the Earth, and he explained solar and lunar eclipses not as the work of demons, as was common in mythological thinking of the era, but as the result of the shadow of the moon and the Earth falling on each other. This was rational, observational astronomy at a time when much of the world still attributed eclipses to supernatural forces. Linguistics. Panini, who is believed to have lived around the 4th century BCE, wrote a text called the Ashtadhyayi, a grammar of Sanskrit composed of nearly 4,000 rules. Linguists today regard it as one of the most sophisticated and rigorous grammars ever written. It is so systematic, so logical in its structure, that modern computational linguists have compared its approach to formal language theory, the mathematical foundation of computer programming languages. A grammar written in ancient India anticipates concepts that would only be formalized by Western mathematicians in the 20th century. and philosophy. Ancient India gave the world philosophy in the deepest sense, not just metaphysics and ontology and epistemology, but practical philosophy, systems for living. The Upanishads, composed between roughly 800 and 200 BCE, asked questions about the nature of consciousness, the self, reality, and the relationship between the individual and the universe that resonate as powerfully today as they did then. What is real? What persists? What is the nature of the self? Is there a self at all? These are not idle questions. These are the deepest questions a human mind can ask. And ancient Indian thinkers were wrestling with them with extraordinary sophistication more than 2,000 years ago. And from within this tradition of philosophical inquiry came something else, something that changed not just Indian thought, but the thought of the entire world: Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama, a prince of the Shakya clan, born in what is now Nepal around 563 BCE, sat beneath a tree in Bodh Gaya and, according to tradition, attained enlightenment. What he taught afterward: the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the radical idea that suffering arises from attachment and that liberation is possible through mindful practice and ethical living, became one of the most influential philosophical and spiritual systems the world has ever seen. Today there are approximately 500 million Buddhists in the world. The teachings of a man born in the foothills of the Himalayas 2,500 years ago shape the daily lives of 500 million people. This is what ancient India built. Not just in stone, in thought, in ideas, in systems of understanding the world and the mind and the nature of existence itself. Part 3. The Maurya Empire and Ashoka the Great. By the 4th century BCE, something new was happening in India. The scattered kingdoms and republics of the subcontinent were being drawn together, consolidated, unified, by force, by strategy, by ambition. The man doing the drawing together was Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta was a young man of unclear origin, possibly from a low-caste background, possibly born into a royal lineage that had lost its position. Accounts differ, but what is not disputed is that somewhere around 321 BCE, with the guidance of a brilliant and ruthless political strategist named Chanakya, Chandragupta seized the throne of the powerful Magadha kingdom and began a campaign of expansion that would eventually make him the first ruler of a unified Indian empire. The Maurya Empire, at its peak, extended from modern-day Afghanistan in the west to Bengal in the east, and from the Himalayan foothills in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south. It was, at the time, one of the largest empires on earth, possibly the largest by population, with an estimated 50 to 60 million people under its control. Chanakya, Chandragupta's advisor and strategist, wrote a text called the Arthashastra. It is a manual of statecraft, economics, military strategy, and governance, and it is extraordinary in its sophistication. The Arthashastra discusses espionage, foreign policy, taxation, law, agriculture, trade, and the duties of a ruler. It anticipates concepts that would not appear in Western political thought until Machiavelli wrote The Prince, nearly 2,000 years later. And in some respects, it goes further. It discusses welfare obligations of the state to its citizens, the duty of the king to ensure food security and economic stability for his people. These are not primitive political ideas. These are sophisticated systems of governance. But the most extraordinary figure of the Maurya Empire was not Chandragupta. It was his grandson, Ashoka. Ashoka came to power around 268 BCE. He continued the expansion of the empire, and around 260 BCE, he fought the Kalinga War. Kalinga was a kingdom on the eastern coast of India, roughly corresponding to the modern state of Odisha. The war was a military success. Kalinga was conquered, and the cost was devastating. Ancient sources, including Ashoka's own inscriptions, suggest that approximately 100,000 people were killed in the war. Another 150,000 were deported, and many more died from the indirect consequences of the conflict. Ashoka saw the aftermath. He walked through the devastation, and according to his own words, carved into rock and pillar across the empire, he was overcome with grief, with remorse, with a profound rethinking of everything he had believed power was for, and he converted to Buddhism. This is remarkable, not just as a personal story, but as a story of governance, because Ashoka did not merely convert in private. He converted publicly, and he attempted to reshape the entire machinery of his empire around the principles of Dharma, of ethical conduct, of non-violence, of compassion. He issued edicts engraved on rocks and polished stone pillars throughout his empire. These edicts, written in multiple languages including Prakrit, Greek, and Aramaic, to reach different populations, contain some of the most remarkable political and ethical statements from the ancient world. Ashoka declared religious tolerance. He stated that people of all faiths should be respected, that no religion should be denigrated, and that the king himself would treat all his subjects with equal care, regardless of their beliefs. This is not a sentiment commonly associated with ancient empires. This is a statement that would be remarkable in many modern political contexts. He established hospitals for both humans and animals. He ordered the planting of shade trees along roads for the comfort of travelers. He dug wells at intervals along highways. He established rest houses. He banned the hunting of many species of animals. He regulated the slaughter of animals for food. He created a corps of officials called Dhammamahamatas, whose job was to travel throughout the empire, promoting ethical conduct and welfare. He built roads, not just for military movement, but for trade and communication. The Maurya road network is often compared to the Roman road system. Milestones were placed at regular intervals. Wells were dug along routes. Bridges were built. He sent missionaries. Buddhist missionaries traveled to Sri Lanka, to Southeast Asia, to Egypt, to Greece, to Syria. The spread of Buddhism across Asia is, in significant part, a consequence of Ashoka's missionary activity. He sent his own son and daughter as missionaries to Sri Lanka, and the Buddhist tradition that took root there has persisted for over 2,000 years. The Ashoka chakra, the wheel that appears on the center of the modern Indian national flag, is named after him. One of the most powerful empires in the ancient world, ruled by a man who, after witnessing the horror of war, chose compassion as his governing principle. That is what ancient India built. Not just walls and roads and pillars. A vision of governance centered on the welfare of people and the ethics of power. Part 4. Temples, caves, and stone. Now let us talk about what you can still see, what still stands, what ancient Indian hands cut and carved and assembled into structures that have lasted thousands of years. Let us begin underground, or more precisely, inside the earth. The Ajanta caves in the state of Maharashtra are a series of 30 Buddhist monasteries and worship halls carved directly into the curved face of a rock cliff. Not built, carved, beginning in the 2nd century BCE and continuing through the 6th century CE. Monks and artisans chipped away at the basalt rock of the cliff, working from the top down, removing stone by hand to create rooms and halls and shrines. The paintings inside these caves are among the most beautiful examples of early Indian art in existence. Scenes from the life of the Buddha, scenes from the Jataka tales, images of bodhisattvas and celestial beings, all executed in vivid colors on plastered rock walls. Colors that, despite being over 1,000 years old, survived in remarkable condition because the caves were sealed by jungle growth and largely forgotten until a British officer stumbled upon them in 1819 while hunting a tiger. Nearby, at Ellora, the ambition scales even higher. Also carved into rock, the Ellora caves include Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain monuments built between the 6th and 11th centuries CE. And among them stands something that still stops visitors in their tracks. The Kailasa Temple. The Kailasa Temple was commissioned by a king of the Rashtrakuta dynasty around the 8th century CE, and its construction method is staggering. The temple was not built by adding stone on top of stone. It was carved from the top down by removing stone from a single enormous basalt rock outcropping to reveal the structure within. The result is a monolithic temple made from a single piece of rock that covers an area twice the size of the Parthenon in Athens and is half again as tall. To construct the Kailasa Temple, an estimated 200,000 tons of rock had to be removed by hand with chisels and hammers. Scholars estimate the project took approximately 100 years to complete, with multiple generations of workers contributing to the excavation and carving. The temple is decorated with elaborate sculptures depicting scenes from Hindu mythology. Elephants support the base. Galleries and pillars line the interior courtyard, and the central tower rises 30 meters into the air. all carved from the original rock. The logistical challenge of this construction is genuinely difficult to comprehend. There is no margin for error in carving a monolithic structure. You cannot add stone back if you remove too much. Every decision made by every worker over a century of construction had to be precise, had to be correct, because the stone does not forgive mistakes. How did they plan it? How did they coordinate across generations? How did the workers in the 8th century know where to carve, to match what workers in the 7th century had left for them? We do not have the blueprints. We do not have the project documentation. We have only the result, the extraordinary, improbable, breathtaking result. Moving south, the temples of Tamil Nadu represent another apex of ancient Indian construction. The Brihadiswara Temple in Tanjavur, built by the Chola king Raja I around 1010 CE, rises 66 meters above the surrounding plain. Its tower is built from granite without the use of mortar. The stones are fitted together with such precision that no binding material is needed. They hold each other in place through engineering and gravity alone. And at the very top of the tower sits a single stone, a capstone called the shikara, that weighs approximately 80 tons. How an 80-ton stone was lifted to the top of a 66-meter tower in 1010 CE remains a subject of scholarly debate. Some researchers believe earthen ramps were built around the tower during construction, allowing the stone to be slowly hauled up. Others propose different methods, but the capstone is there. It has been there for over 1,000 years, and the engineering that put it there was entirely the product of Indian minds and Indian hands. The Chola dynasty, which built Brihadiswara and dozens of other major temples across South India, was also one of the most powerful naval empires in the medieval world. Chola fleets controlled maritime trade routes across the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. They launched military expeditions to Southeast Asia, reaching as far as the Malay Peninsula and Sumatra. The kingdom of Srivijaya, which controlled much of maritime Southeast Asia, was raided by Chola forces in the 11th century in one of the most remarkable long-distance naval operations of the medieval period. Ancient India built not just inward, it built outward, across the sea, into the world. Part 5, Science, Surgery, and the Body. There is one more area where ancient India built something extraordinary, something that we do not often think of as a building project, but which is, in its own way, one of the most remarkable constructions in human history. A system of medicine, Ayurveda, the science of life, developed over centuries, codified in texts that date back over 2,000 years. Ayurveda represents one of the oldest and most comprehensive medical systems ever created. But let us set Ayurveda aside for a moment and talk about something more specific, more startling, more immediately impressive. Surgery. Sushruta, a physician who is believed to have lived somewhere between 600 and 1000 BCE, though the exact dating is debated, wrote a text called the Sushruta Samhita. It is one of the most remarkable medical documents from the ancient world, and it describes, in detail, over 300 surgical procedures and over 120 surgical instruments. Among the procedures described in the Sushruta Samhita is rhinoplasty, reconstruction of the nose. The text describes in detail how to use a flap of skin from the forehead, keeping it attached at one end to maintain blood supply, to reconstruct a nose that has been damaged or removed. The technique described by Sushruta, the forehead flap rhinoplasty, is recognizably similar to techniques still used in reconstructive surgery today. It was observed by British physicians in India in the 18th century, documented and brought back to Europe. It became the foundation of modern reconstructive surgery in the Western world. Let that be clear. The foundation of modern reconstructive surgery traces directly to a technique described in ancient India. The Sushruta Samhita also describes cataract surgery. A needle-like instrument is used to push the clouded lens out of the line of sight, restoring vision. This procedure, called couching, was practiced in ancient India and was likely the only treatment for cataracts available anywhere in the world for most of human history. It describes the principles of wound care, the importance of cleanliness in surgical settings, the training and ethical obligations of physicians, and a detailed understanding of human anatomy developed through careful study. The Charaka Samhita, another foundational Ayurvedic text, also contains sophisticated medical insights. It describes over 600 medicinal plants. It discusses the importance of diet, sleep, and mental state in health. It recognizes that the body has systems and that disease arises from imbalances within those systems. It emphasizes the relationship between physician and patient as a partnership rather than a hierarchy, and it contains ethical principles for medical practice that resonate with modern medical ethics. Ancient Indian physicians understood the concept of immunity. They described a process called variolation, using material from cowpox or mild smallpox to protect against severe smallpox infection. Centuries before Edward Jenner developed his smallpox vaccine in 1796. The Indian practice of inoculation was documented by European physicians visiting India in the 17th century, and some historians argue that knowledge of the Indian practice contributed to the development of vaccination in the West. India built a science of the body, a science of healing, a science of the mind in relation to the body. Thousands of years before the word science existed in its modern form, Indian thinkers were observing, theorizing, testing, and documenting the workings of human health with a rigor and sophistication that demands respect. And there is mathematics still. We spoke of zero, but there is more. The Kerala School of Astronomy and Mathematics, a group of scholars working in what is now the Indian state of Kerala between the 14th and 16th centuries, developed infinite series expansions for trigonometric functions. These are mathematical techniques that in the West are attributed to European mathematicians of the 17th and 18th centuries, Newton and Leibniz and Gregory and others. But in Kerala, these techniques were being used centuries earlier. Some historians of mathematics now argue that this work may have been transmitted to Europe through trade and missionary routes, influencing the development of calculus in the Western mathematical tradition. The story of ancient India and mathematics is a story of priority, a story of credit that was often not given, that is only now beginning to be properly understood. And it matters, not for reasons of national pride, but because understanding where ideas came from, how they traveled, how they were developed and transmitted across cultures, gives us a more accurate and more complete picture of human intellectual history. So let us come back slowly to the present. Let your body relax completely against wherever you are resting. Let your breathing slow down. Let the images fade, the carved stone caves, the polished pillars, the grid-planned streets, the drainage systems, the surgical tools, the equations, the edicts carved into rock by a king who chose compassion over conquest. Ancient India built all of this, and more, far more than one night could contain. It built cities when most of the world was living in scattered settlements. It built philosophical and mathematical and scientific traditions that shaped the intellectual history of the entire world in ways that are only now being properly documented and credited. It built temples of astonishing scale and precision. It built a system of medicine that influenced surgery and healing practices across the globe. It built empires and navies and road networks. It built ideas about governance and ethics and the nature of the self that remain as vital and relevant today as they were when they were first formulated. And it built all of this with almost no acknowledgement in most of the world's standard history education. In most Western schools, ancient India is a footnote, a paragraph, a photo, but footsteps walked those grid-planned streets. Hands carved those cave walls. Minds worked those mathematical problems. Hearts wrestled with those philosophical questions. Real human beings with real ambitions and fears and loves and losses built something extraordinary over thousands of years on a subcontinent that deserves far more than a paragraph. Now let your eyes close, if they have not already. Let the weight of your body settle. Let the stories settle with it. The Indus Valley under the soil, the caves in the cliff, the pillars of Ashoka in the open air, still standing, still carrying their words. The Kailasa Temple, carved from a single mountain. The wheel on the Indian flag, carrying a name from the 3rd century BCE into the 21st century. Let it all rest. Let it settle into the part of your mind that holds things worth knowing, things worth carrying, things worth remembering. You have listened well tonight, and now it is time to sleep. Sleep well. Dream of ancient things, and when you wake, carry with you this. The world is older and more brilliant and more surprising than the history books suggest. And India, ancient India, is one of the places the books have most underestimated. Good night. If this journey through ancient India kept you company tonight, do one small thing before you drift off, or before you close this video. Hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds, and it means this channel can keep making deep, researched, long-form history content like this. And if you want to go further, there is a playlist waiting for you. Ancient civilizations, forgotten empires, lost histories, history that does not make it into the textbooks, but absolutely should. We will be here every week with another story worth knowing. Sleep well, history explorers. We will see you in the next one.